All right, that is President Trump just wrapping up a rally in Topeka, Kansas. A really very, very positive speech on an incredible day where we witnessed history with an associate justice being confirmed and sworn in to the United States Supreme Court. It's the culmination of one of the most contentious Supreme Court hearings that we've ever seen in American history. And this president, of course, in Topeka, Kansas, talking about all of the great things that have been done. A huge day for him, a huge day for the Republican Party as he continues to march through the country to get people to support the candidates in their states just prior to the midterm. A fired up President Trump, clearly doing what he does best, just wrapping up that rally speech in Topeka, Kansas. Well, we have a political panel here tonight. CPAC Chairman Matt Schlapp, an NRA TV contributor, former Secret Service agent Dan Bongino, to break it all down tonight. All right, guys, first of all, I just want to get your take on the huge day that the president had. I mean, you could sense the excitement of the crowd, the excitement of the president today. What do you think, Matt?
What I think is interesting is that we had one of the biggest votes that we'll ever see in the United States Senate with Brett Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh. And you can see how intertwined it is in politics, because here the president is at the rally. What's the number one thing they wanted to hear about? They wanted to hear about this great victory at the Supreme Court. It means that this victory by President Trump with Kavanaugh is going to make Republicans' jobs easier in November.
Well, and you know, Dan Bongino, last week you had quite an energized panel discussion with Chris Hahn talking about how horrible Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, was treated. This week was an incredible week in terms of the turnaround with the president in Mississippi and how he then kind of changed the conversation to back to Christine Ford. What would you say to Chris Hahn, who isn't here tonight?
You know, I was disappointed in Chris last week because he's a personal friend of mine, but he did something last week that disgusted me. He attacked and he jumped on this liberal train to destroy this good man, Brett Kavanaugh, a patriot. And a really good man, Judge. I was deeply offended by that. But today, this is a vindication. And Chris, you know what? You know what I got to say? How you like them apples? That's what I got to say. Reminds me of that scene in Good Will Hunting when he knocks on, you like apples? How you like them apples? This was a vindication, Judge. A vindication of, one more point on this, a vindication of Trumpism, and Matt knows it too. Listen, for too long we've been in a boxing match, a political boxing match with the left wearing brass knuckles, and we're appealing to the ref, the media. Please tell him to take the brass knuckles off. Trump took the gloves off. He's fought back. We got tax cuts, economic growth, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh. Trumpism's been vindicated. Take a victory lap tonight.
It's unbelievable. In fact, all my viewers, the president is going to be calling in the next few minutes. I'm sure after he gets out of the arena there in Topeka, Kansas, we'll be able to talk to him. On, I think, one of the most exciting days of his presidency. I mean, who could have predicted that this would actually happen, Matt? I mean, it was Brett Kavanaugh went from this great circuit court judge to a guy involved in gang rapes, a sexual predator. I mean, it was, I think, some of the darkest days they had to be of Brett Kavanaugh's life. And now he's back up and just sworn in as an associate justice of the Supreme Court.
And it shows you how our politics has changed, because the only reason that happened is that Brett Kavanaugh went to that hearing in the Senate and connected with the American people and honestly and aggressively pushed back on these scurrilous charges. It was that moment that sealed his fate so that he would actually be confirmed in the Senate. And I think there were people across this country who were so enthralled, I think maybe even people in the White House there as well, by the sheer honesty and the emotion of all this, because every American felt the pain of this. They know what it's like when someone gets railroaded, and he was the personification of great injustice.
You know, it wasn't just being railroaded, Matt, and I'll go to you, Dan. It was about eliminating the presumption of innocence.
Right.
It was about a mob rule dictating that all women should be believed and men should just shut up. My fear was that Lady Justice was not only, having the bandage ripped off and told which way to go, but that she was being thrown out of the game totally. And that was frightening, I think, to a lot of Americans who believe in the system, believe in the presumption of innocence. And I think it may have brought out people who would never have really cared about a Supreme Court nomination.
Right, but Judge, the reason we won here is important. What you just said is absolutely accurate. The left has done this before. They lob a grenade onto the political battlefield, and that grenade ends in ist. Racist, misogynist. In this case, it was rapist, which was disgusting.
Wow.
And in the past, a lesser president, Judge, would have backed away immediately and said, hey, Judge, for the better of the country, step aside. Trump said, no, not today. And Matt hit the nail on the head. When Brett Kavanaugh got up there and said, not today, not on my watch. I may not sit on the Supreme Court, but you're not going to crap on my reputation and decades of good work for this country and my family. Matt is absolutely right. Trump was there for him. He knew he was there for him. And the corner turned, and the American people were energized, and the Democrat air got out of that balloon.
I'm going to interrupt you, Dan. Dan, I'm going to interrupt you. As I said, we have the president calling in, and I understand that joining me now by phone is the president of the United States, Donald Trump. Mr. President?
Well, Dan sounded very good, very good. We appreciate Dan.
Yeah, Dan is a great guy, but Mr. President, I must tell you that this is one of the most significant days of your presidency. It was a whirlwind week, and I just want to know, how do you feel tonight? I don't know. I think... Okay, we're gonna keep going to the panel. So then, Matt, I'll ask you just to follow up on what Dan was saying. Other presidents would have bailed. I don't think there's any question. And I'm going to ask the president about this when we get the connection back.
This is the right thing. This was history. When a nominee hits the rocks, like clearly Brett Kavanaugh, as unfair as it was, but he hit the rocks.
Yeah, he did.
And when people heard Dr. Ford speak, I can't tell you, my phone just blew up. People said, "Boy, this sounds
credible.
This sounds credible. He's got to drop Kavanaugh." And I told everyone who called and said, "You've got to listen to the full day." And I think the president did something. He broke the back of the left on this idea that they can just throw out charges, put a lot of dust in our eyes, and presidents will back off. They're now dealing with somebody who's not a politician. He's not going to back off.
Yeah.
And this means that when we get our next opening, they don't know what to do. They've tried everything in their bag of tricks.
Well, Dan, I think that what Matt and you are both saying is that we not only have a president who's a counterpuncher, but we have a president who is in a position to just ignore all of the rules and just go with his gut and go with his instinct. And I believe that that's what brought us to the Kavanaugh confirmation today and his ascension to the United States Supreme Court. But do you think that the left has learned that the more ridiculous they get, the less credible they're going to be to the American people?
No, they haven't learned a damn thing. They played along while the entire government was weaponized to take down Donald Trump. Frankly, he gave him the double-barreled middle finger. He won anyway. He's now the president. And Judge, there's a reason we are where we are with Donald Trump. He didn't spend his entire life running for office learning how to sell out. He built stuff. You have to build stuff. You either see a building or you don't. He had to deal with union bosses, New York City, government people trying to shake him down sometimes. He had to deal with the worst of the worst, and he had to build the damn building. Politicians learn to sell out their entire careers. That's why he is who he is, and that's why Brett Kavanaugh is sitting on the Supreme Court right now.
All right, I want to remind my viewers that we were on with the president just a few moments ago, and we're trying to get the connection back. So don't go anywhere. He is trying to get back to us, as I understand it. Now, Matt, you know Brett Kavanaugh.
I do.
Okay. How do you go through the emotional roller coaster that he went through, and when he gets to today, being sworn in. I mean, I had chills. I mean, I'm a lawyer. I mean, I was also a judge, but I had chills.
Right.
How do you think, is it bittersweet for him?
Look, I served with him throughout 9/11, throughout all the heady issues around wars. We had amazing days. You do in almost every White House, but especially around those things. And he is a very unflappable person. The person people saw in the Senate pushing back aggressively, that was honest emotion to these charges. But the Brett Kavanaugh that's at work every day, he is steady Eddie. The person that I think is also amazing is his wife and his kids. Ashley, another great friend, she just hung in there. They're people of faith, Judge. They believe that God has a plan for their lives. I'm sure he believes that the skills that God gave him are to be in the law.
Oh, well, they will.
And I think we're going to see that as a justice. He is going to not use his personal opinions, not his faith. He's going to read the words of the Constitution, and consequences be damned. And if people want to criticize him, I think he'll be a lot like Clarence Thomas. I don't think he's going to worry about it because he knows he's going to do his job.
Yeah, well, and you know, Dan, he has clearly been raked over the coals. This is a justice who, as Susan Collins, Senator Susan Collins made clear yesterday in her brilliant remarks in the Senate, who relies on what we call stare decisis and precedent, and who understands that under Griswold versus Connecticut and Roe versus Wade, that there are certain things like privacy that Griswold, established that have to be followed. Do you think that that is something that's going to affect the midterms as we go forward?
You know what I think is going to affect the midterms more on this, Judge? Honestly, just candidly speaking, the really visceral, disgusting attacks on Kavanaugh, who was, by the way, a brilliant pick strategically. And I want to sell that short. Think about this, right? President Trump had to understand that he was not, even though Gorsuch was not the most pleasant confirmation, this was going to be a lot uglier because it was Kennedy's seat on the swing vote. They knew Kavanaugh was a conservative, but they knew he was a Bush guy as well. This was a brilliant pick by Trump because, Judge, what did it do? It galvanized factions of the Republican Party, let's be candid, that have been at each other's throats. Trump always gets sold short on his strategy. This was a brilliant pick. Kavanaugh was probably the only guy who would get through right now under these circumstances.
And the truth, Dan, that you articulated so well, the result is that the Republican Party going into the midterms is now more unified than it's been in decades. So it was brilliant on so many levels. And
look, even with women, Judge, all the Republican surge and the energy that you see in all these polls, you actually see the Democrats have screwed up their double-digit advantage with women. You know why? Women are moms. Women are sisters. Their wives. They saw this as an unfair treatment of any man in their life. It could happen to any man in their life. And the Democrats have screwed it up even with women.
That's right. And of course, to my viewers, we're still waiting on President Trump to call in live any moment now. But let's talk more about the president's rally tonight. Very exciting times in Topeka, Kansas, especially if you're a Donald Trump supporter. Let's go live now to Doug McElway in Topeka, where the president just wrapped up.
Hi, Judge Jeanine, and I think you said it right. This is arguably the high point of the Trump presidency to date. And the reason being is he solidified his legacy for potentially decades to come with the appointment now of two conservative justices on the high court who will obviously demonstrate, people hope, that conservatism in the years going. And certainly, if that is the case, it has moved the court in a rightward tilt in ways that has not been reflected in literally decades. And the crowd here in this arena recognize that. We all know that the President Trump has occasionally fudged numbers about crowd size in some of the arenas. This place, Landon Arena, holds 10,000 people. There was not a single seat to be had here tonight. Every seat filled here. And the enthusiasm level was reflected in that as well. They knew what was happening here. I was here about early this afternoon when the vote reached the threshold, 50 to 48. It was about half full at that time. The president was in the air at the time. But people were getting that news on their cell phone, via text messages, via emails, via telephone calls, and there was an uproarious thunder of applause at that point in time. And then when the president himself came out here to reaffirm that news, there was just thunderous applause. I want you to listen to a little bit of it. Do we have that? Okay, apparently we do not have that. But it again also demonstrates how Donald Trump has completely upended conventional political thinking. His style of counterpunching even reflected in the defense of Judge Kavanaugh himself. We've learned now from a New York Times report that Don McGahn, the White House counsel, pulled him aside after
Doug, I'm going to cut
Christine
you
Ford's
off.
testimony.
Joining me now by phone, the President of the United States, Donald Trump. Mr. President, thanks for getting back to us.
Jeanine,
Hi. Okay, so let's get right to it.
How is your reception now, Jeanine? They had
Yeah,
a
it's
security
great.
reception situation, but never
All right, you're
sounds too good. Is it okay?
It's okay, and you're on air right now, Mr. President, so
Good,
let's
I like
get to
that.
it.
Good. With you,
Okay.
I like being on air with your beautiful
Well,
radio.
thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. President, even, aside from the some of the protesters, in Washington, there is an excitement. We have a Supreme Court justice. It's one of the highlights of your administration so far. You have to be very, very excited about what you accomplished, and you accomplished it.
Well, I am very excited, and the protesters were a very small group, a tiny group of people. I just left tens of thousands of people in Kansas, and it's amazing what's going in the country, and we have a great new Supreme Court justice, Jeanine, as you know very well.
I do. And Mr. President, a lot of people, other presidents might have pulled the plug. And we were talking about this while we were trying to reconnect with you. There were a lot of other conservative justices that you could have said, okay, let's try somebody else. And it wouldn't have been the first time a president did that. But you stuck with Kavanaugh during his darkest moments. Why?
Well, for one thing, it would have been very unfair to him. If you think about it, he's a highly respected man. What the Democrats did was disgraceful. These things happened that just came out of the wind. There was no corroboration. There was no anything, Jeanine. This is a high-quality, brilliant man. He'll be a phenomenal Supreme Court justice. And it was my honor to stick. And I know that. A lot of people told me that. They said, well, we'll switch. You'll never get anybody like this. This is a very, very outstanding person and individual with an incredible family, and it would have been very unfair to him. What they did was disgraceful, what the Democrats did, and you saw that group with Blumenthal, who falsified his service in Vietnam, and a terrible mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Cory Booker, and, the whole group, Dianne Feinstein, who, in my opinion, leaked the papers. It was terrible what was happening and what was happening. Very unfair, so I did stick to me, yes. And I'm very happy.
And Mr. President, you have a very uncanny instinct. You have a gut sense of things, and you were very disciplined after Christine Ford came out and the left was going wacky. But there was one point where you pivoted at a rally in Mississippi just a few days ago. You went off script, and some people said that you were extremely unkind to Christine Ford. But what was it that got you to pivot from your restraint about her and to fight for Kavanaugh at that point?
Well, there were a lot of things happening that weren't correct. They weren't true. And there were a lot of things that were left unsaid. And I thought I had to even the playing field because it was very unfair to judge. Now I can, very nicely say Justice Kavanaugh.
Right.
And,
right.
It was a very unfair situation. So I evened the playing field. And once I did that, it started to sail through. He was treated very, very unfairly, Jeanine.
And Mr. President, when you say it started to sail through, even the Washington Post, I'm going to repeat that, even the Washington Post, top of the fold today, talks about the fact that when you went off script and you went after Christine Ford, saying nothing that wasn't already true, talking about her memory failures regarding the fundamentals of her assault, they said it was a turning point to victory, that when you did that, you turbocharged the momentum behind Kavanaugh. When his fate was most in doubt, I mean, there's no question that he has to turn around and the country and recognize that what you did was instinctive, it was guttural, and you did it, and you won.
Well, I think it was a very important moment. It was a very big turning point, as the Washington Post was actually, shockingly, they said something that was very positive. And I'm very proud of it because we're going to have a great, great justice of the Supreme Court for many years. And I fought hard to make sure that he got on, and you're going to see what happens. You're going to see how great he will be and will become. I have no doubt about it at all.
All right. So coming out of this, should there be consequences, Mr. President, to those people who promoted falsehoods? When you look at someone like that lawyer Avenatti, who, the allegations that he was promoting when he brings out this alleged victim were so preposterous that they dissipated on their own. Should this person be held for the falsehoods, not just in terms of grievances with the Bar Association, but even beyond that?
Well, he made false accusations about me on another matter, totally false. It's a joke. When just a disgrace that they're able to do it. I'd love to see our libel laws get toughened up so you could take people and sue them.
Exactly.
But he made the same thing, totally false statements. You look at what happened, and yes, I think they should be held liable. I would say they should be held to the highest standard. You can't go around and whether it's making up stories or making false statements about such an important position, you can't do that. You destroy somebody's life. And there were many, many false things that were said about a very fine man and would have destroyed his family if this didn't happen. And it all came together in the end, and people realized it was false accusations, false statements. It was really something very interesting and actually very nice to see, because he suffered, Jeanine. That was really unfair. I watched that very closely, and he suffered with false statements made about him, things that never happened.
Did the Democrats make a tactical mistake that worked to Republicans' advantage, unfortunately, with Brett Kavanaugh as a sacrificial lamb, who I believe, and I'm just going to say it again, the turnaround was you in Mississippi. But did they make a tactical mistake, and is their anger going to carry them to the midterms in a positive way?
Well, I think they overplayed their hand. I think they were very dishonest with the leaks and other things that they did. Even look at the lawyers representing certain people. They're right out of the Democrat playbook. They've represented others that are Democrats. That's what they do. How did they end up with all these lawyers that are always the same ones? And I won't even go into names, but I think they overplayed their hand. And I can tell you that the enthusiasm and the love and the feeling in the Republican Party right now is higher than I've ever seen it. And you see polls that are going up like rocket ships, races that are going to be won by margins on races, frankly, that the Republicans wouldn't have won. And now they're leading, and they're just better. We need more votes so that we can cut taxes, even more so that we can do things that they will never do. They're going to open borders, and crime is going to pour in. We want to have no crime. We want to have borders where you come into the country legally. You come in through a legal process. And so many things. The enthusiasm for the Republican Party is the strongest I've ever seen it, Jeanine. And it happened all over the last 2 to 3 weeks.
All right, and if you're joining us, I'm Judge Jeanine Pirro. You're joining Justice. We are having a conversation. It is the top of the hour with the President of the United States. I'm going to continue that conversation, Mr. President. Continuing with the discussion, you said that Murkowski will never recover from voting no on Kavanaugh, and then she kind of neutralized it by saying she was neutralized with the Senator Deere, I believe, whose daughter was getting married. What's going to happen to her in 2022?
I don't know what's going to happen to her. I thought it was a very, very sad vote. I thought it was very, frankly, disgraceful. And I appreciate that a Democrat, Joe Manchin, came and he voted in favor of Justice Kavanaugh, and that was a good thing. But that was very disappointing. The people of Alaska, I had tremendous success in Alaska. And what I've done for them with Anwar, which is one of the biggest drilling sites in the world. Ronald Reagan tried to get it approved. Bush tried to get it approved. Everybody tried to get it approved for close to 50 years. I got it approved. It means trillions of dollars. And I'm not equating one thing with the other at all. But I've done so much for Alaska. I was shocked to see her vote. Absolutely shocked. And frankly, so were other Republicans. It was a very sad day, I think, for her. And I think it will go down as a sad day for her because she's going to become a great Supreme Court justice.
Yes, and with respect to Susan Collins and the speech that she made on the Senate floor yesterday, which she's been receiving kudos from everyone, they say that Senator Susan Collins is now receiving death threats. I'm going to show some of the video of people who continue to disrupt outside the Senate floor as they voted today. What can we do about this? What kind of protection are United States senators going to get in this rough and tumble left that seems to have lost all sense of law and order?
Well, you receive threats on both sides, but I will tell you, Susan Collins was a star. What she did was incredible. I spoke to her yesterday. What she said and the way she said it was brilliant, and it really covered it. She has, from the beginning, really liked Brett Kavanaugh. She had respect for his incredible genius, him as a scholar, him as a, great person of the law. Nobody knows it better. And she respected that. She respected it right from the beginning, and she wanted to make sure that she was right on every other subject, including outside influence that came in. And in the end, she went through, probably as carefully as anybody, she went through every paper, every document, and I thought her statement yesterday was absolutely brilliant, and we're very proud of her. And I'll tell you what, she's more popular now than she's ever been, and she's always been good, but she is more popular now, Jeanine, than she's ever been.
One of the things that she referenced, Mr. President, was that there was dark money, that's a quote, dark money opposing this Kavanaugh nomination. What do you think she meant by that?
Well, I think I'd rather let her explain it, but it's a very, very serious thing going on with respect to this nomination. And the Democrats know he's so good, they just didn't want him there. And they would have fought others also, by the way, but they did not want him there. He is great in every way, and he's central casting. I mean, this is a man that was born for the position. I heard his name 10 years ago. They used to talk about he will someday be a Supreme Court justice. That was long before I thought of running for president, frankly. I used to hear his name as somebody that really should be on the Supreme Court. And that's what I did. I put him on the Supreme Court. And it's going to be, I really think it's a great day for our country.
Oh, a lot of people are sharing in this celebration, Mr. President. Do you think, though, when you spoke to him, of course, do you think it was bittersweet for him?
Well, I know this. It was going to be very easy, and I picked him also for that reason. I said, this man is so good in every way, on a personal basis, on an intellectual basis, on a scholarly basis in schools, the highest grades, the highest marks, first in this class. I said, this will be an easy one. And they fabricated stories about him to make him look as bad as possible. They're fabrications. Had no bearing in truth. And it was really very difficult. And I'm really happy that we've all stuck it out. You can say I stuck it out, but he stuck it out also, and that took courage, because what they did to him and his family, Jeanine, was horrible.
Yeah. It's a tough thing, especially when you have little girls. I want to move on to something that you talked about at the rally, Mr. President, and you talked about a sixth branch of the armed forces, the Space Force. What is the Space Force?
Well, Jeanine, as we advance, space is becoming more and more important for defense, and that means defense and offense. And if it's going to be a part of the Air Force or one of our other forces, frankly, it's never going to be out front. It needs its own identity. And we're doing Space Force. The generals agree with me 100%. And so much of our defense and offense will be related to space. So we're setting up a new branch of the armed forces that's taking place very rapidly. Everybody agrees with it.
All right, and Melania, who was in Africa today, I think in Egypt at the in Giza at the pyramids, she looked so phenomenal.
I agree.
Her visit
there. We're very proud of her. She was in 4 African countries. She went today. She was actually at the pyramids, and she's coming
Yes.
home. She'll be home very early tomorrow morning, and she did a fantastic job. She's a great first lady. She's representing our country so well, and people love Melania, and they're all very proud of her.
Well, your numbers have certainly gone up, but I must tell you, her numbers are even higher. And she is such a classy first lady. It's always great looking at her and listening to her. Mr. President, I am sure you have a lot of things to celebrate tonight. I am hoping that as we go toward the midterms, that that we'll be able to get the results of this successful, or feel the results of this successful momentum for your party, although I suspect the Democratic anger is going to be out there too. Last question, which one wins?
Well, I think the Republicans are going to do very well. We need some more. You know, we have these tiny majorities. Tiny. If somebody catches a cold, Jeanine, it's like we have to wait till they come back. We need more votes to get it all done. We're building the wall as we speak. But I want to get it all at one time because we can have it done very quickly, and so many other things. But for the most part, we've done almost everything. We're building the military. We have all of the money we need. That was very tough. That was massively more than the wall. The wall is very small by comparison, but we've done so much, and we're so happy about it. We're doing a great job for the American people, and it is my honor to do that. I'm very happy about it.
All right. Mr. President, we thank you very much for joining Justice this evening. I think it's time you celebrated a little, although knowing you'll probably just go back to work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeanine. Thank you.
All right.